This island is called Tromelin Island in the middle of the Indian Ocean. It was so sandy that it could be called a desert of the sea. In 1761, about 100 slaves were captured and left on this island. What happened to them? Did they manage to survive on an island alone in the middle of the ocean? Or did they disappear? Let's find out about one of the most terrible events in the history of the world today. This heartbreaking event took place in early 1761. At that time, black people were looked down upon in America. They were not considered human beings at all. And that is why white people sold them as slaves. Of course, the slave trade was prohibited in France at that time. So at that time, a French ship with 32 crew members was going from Madagascar to Mauritius. At that time, both these islands were under the French colony. Various French traders and companies used to trade various products between Madagascar and Mauritius at that time. But at that time, in France, any kind of slave trade was completely prohibited. But despite all these prohibitions, many French slave traders secretly traded slaves on the sea. That is why, along with the general public, 160 slaves were being smuggled on that ship. However, there was a small island in the middle of that sea, Tromelin Island. Suddenly, a huge argument broke out between the captain and the passengers of the ship that was going to Mauritius about the wrong route. Seeing this, the captain also became distracted. The situation was further worsened by the high waves of the sea. Due to the deep darkness at night, nothing could be seen ahead. Suddenly, the ship came near Tromelin Island and hit it hard and started sinking. Although most of the passengers and some slaves were able to get out, many drowned with the ship, and the rest took refuge on Tromelin Island. Among them were 80 slaves, all the ordinary passengers and the captain of the ship. Many of them had salvaged some food and equipment from the sinking ship. And unfortunately, some problems arose with the distribution of this food. Tensions began to rise among the people. A man named Verney helped the captain to resolve this. As a result, the situation of the people began to worsen. But even then, that man named Verney decided to collect all the wood on the island and build a small ship, so that they could leave the island. Finally, they were able to build a ship. But even though the ship was built, all the white citizens of France boarded it first. That ship had a capacity of only 122 people, and so there were about 80 people left on the island. They were all slaves of the whites. However, Verney promised to send a rescue ship for them and set off for Mauritius. Finally, 4 days later, the ship arrived in Mauritius. Upon arrival, Verney and the captain of the ship met with the governor. They told the local governor about the miserable condition of Tromelin Island and asked him to send a rescue ship. But the governor refused geopolitically, because Captain and Verney had brought slaves on the ship in defiance of the law. Moreover, at that time, France and Britain were at war for 7 years. As a result, France's economic situation had collapsed, due to which, despite repeated requests, they did not send any ships. Finally, when the war ended, the French government decided to send a ship to rescue the people trapped on Tromelin Island. Finally, in 1775, 2 ships were sent to Tromelin Island. One of those ships was to rescue the trapped people, and the other was sent to see how they were. The ship that was first sent to find out the condition of the trapped people came back and said that they were still alive. But because the sea conditions were very rough at that time, it was not possible to rescue the people trapped on that ship. Then in 1776, a man named Tromelin reached the island with his own ship, and on his own initiative, he started rescuing the people trapped there. Later, the island was named Tromelin after that man. Unfortunately, when he arrived there after so many years, only 8 out of the 80 people there were alive, and out of the 8 people, 7 were women and an 8-year-old child. Tromelin and his team were all surprised to think that how these 8 people had lived alone on this deserted island for 15 years. Those who survived said that they were able to survive for 15 years only because of a fire. Incredibly, they kept a fire burning continuously on that island for 15 years. They never let that fire go out, and this fire gave them the courage to fight and survive for so many years. They never let that fire go out in various hostile environments, storms and rains. However, after surviving the ship, the captain of the sinking ship, if you enjoyed this story, subscribe to Forgotten Mysteries for more unbelievable true stories from history.